Welcome. So we're here in a pub because truthfully, outside of the university, the main place where we do discuss our research with students in England tends to be in pubs. And we've invited Nick, who is currently one of the students in our UCL Digital Anthropology program, to ask us whatever questions he likes about how we actually conducted our research. Thank you, Nick.
Okay, so I heard what was special about this project was that it was comparative. What does that actually mean in practice?
So what was really special about this project was that you had 9 anthropologists doing 15 months of fieldwork in those respective countries at the same time.
Well, Nell started a bit later actually, but otherwise that's
Well, yeah. And then what we would do was we would allocate certain topics per month. So for example, month 4 was politics, month 5 was family, and we'd work on those in our sites at the same time. And then we would compare notes, and you can see the contrast come up as they're kind of happening. So for example, I would see that in Trinidad, people really care about what they look like on Facebook, whereas in the English field site, people kind of didn't.
We did change some of our topics as our research progressed. So for example, at the start we were going to research older people for one of our months, but as we started doing our research we found that in some of our field sites, like my own in rural China, that older people just really didn't use social media that much. On the other hand, I found out that in rural China, people cared a lot about education and the impact social media was having on that. And that happened in some of our other field sites too. So we chose to make that one of the topics that we concentrated on for a whole month of our research.
Was it confusing changing topics midway through?
Well, actually, it was the comparative that really helped us as anthropologists. So what would keep happening was you would just see these differences and different meanings coming up. Like in Trinidad, when they ask for a family photo, they mean a family photo, like with the cousins, the uncles, the aunts, and everybody. Whereas at another site, family photo means parents, siblings, that's it.
Actually, my case was quite a bit different in China because in China we had 2 field sites and they really couldn't have been more different. In my rural Chinese field site, people cared quite a lot about traditional values like hard work and education. By contrast, in Xinyuan's field site in industrial China, people were motivated by a completely kind of different set of ideals, which just goes to show that you really can't generalize about a place like China.
Actually, we didn't just compare our results when we were in the field. When we got back and we all started writing our 9 books, we decided that we'd all have exactly the same chapter headings. Now, you might think that would lead to a lot of repetition, but really what that showed very clearly was just how different each of the sites are with respect to the same topic.
So my friends often argue that ethnography isn't a science enough, that there isn't enough proof, that there isn't an exact sample size and that it's too anecdotal.
To be honest, I think some of the worst work is done on social media by people who think they have to be like kind of natural scientists. Why? Because what they're going to do is they take something that's publicly available, like all that Twitter data, and they do lots and lots of papers about that. But then something like WhatsApp, which is very private, and people have to really trust you even before you get to see what they're posting there, they neglect. So if you have lots of papers on Twitter, but hardly any on WhatsApp, isn't that a bit of a distortion? And similarly, if, like a natural scientist, you think that we're dealing with universals, so okay, you can do your work with, say, US college kids, do some kind of experiment, but then you extrapolate from that to say, oh, that's what Instagram is. But what we know from our project is you can't go from US college kids and say that applies to farmers in India, because it doesn't. So that's another distortion. Whereas, if you look at the kind of way we work, sure, you can call it anecdotes. But to be honest, we can collect those anecdotes by going to these field sites for 15 days. But actually, all of us made the commitment to spend 15 months. And the reason for that is we do care about scholarship. Even if it's a different kind of scholarship, we really care that after 15 months, you can start to say, okay, I think that actually was representative of something that's going on and that I can now actually talk about with a bit of authority.
Yeah, of course, Danny. So, people who've become your friends over a year are going to give you really different answers to if you've just met them or in a broad questionnaire. So we really have to think about the fact that different research methods will give us different findings and we'll draw different conclusions from them. And what you get from spending a long time somewhere and becoming really good friends with somebody is going to be completely different insights into how social media affects those little nuances of their lives that you might be able to get at with a really broad questionnaire questionnaire for 1,000 people, say.
Didn't you use any quantitative methods during the project at all?
Well, yeah, we did do a lot of questionnaires as well. In each field site, we did 2 surveys with 100 people each.
Actually, I did one questionnaire that was nearly 2,500 school children.
Well, yeah, but that was really just a one-off. The rest of us stuck to the 100 questionnaires, and that was mainly to cross-reference with what else was coming up in the more qualitative stuff from the field site. But also, we wanted a more representative sort of spread of people that we were interviewing and we were meeting. So, for example, people of different income levels. We kind of wanted to cover those sorts of things.
So at the end of the day, what is it that you actually want us to do?
Yeah, what we'd really like people to do, of course, is to read all the 11 books, because that's where all the evidence is. But I hope that at least after this discussion, whichever ones you read, you've got a better sense of actually how we undertook the research and why we did it that way.